Okay, so this is my defeating dropout, keeping clients framework. That's the that's the awesome alliteration I've been using. Let's make this even better. There we go. Boom. Dr. Jordan Harris. So let me just give you a little bit of backstory about me, man, and why I think this is super important. Um, but before I do that, I want to ask you to answer these two questions. Like, why is this important to you?
I think having a framework is important to me, especially in the beginning when I'm seeing somebody new, to help me feel grounded. Um, and also, of course, like running my own practice, you you want to increase that average of times they come back, and avoid the dropout. So yeah, I think those are the couple having a map and also keeping them.
Yeah. The thing that really sticks out to me about what you just said is like you want to stay grounded. Like it's like if I have a map, I sort of know what I'm doing. I can sort of like calm my own anxiety and all this, and like okay, and then maybe I can not be freaking out about what do I do next, and also like hanging out with this client.
Mhm. Mhm.
What have you done in the past? What's your sort of typical thing that you already do?
Kind of asking my initial few sessions framework. So
Yeah.
kind of okay. What I have been doing um, is that the first session is all about just letting them feel heard and especially letting them go where they want to go. Often clients come in like hot and ready to there's things that like they if they don't share it, they're gonna walk out being like, nah, I just didn't feel like I got out of what I wanted to get out. So I want to make sure the first session I feel like I just kind of it feels scattered because I'm just kind of letting them steer get out. And then the next couple are about assessment for me and kind of crystallizing direction, but it's sort of loose. Like I feel like I'm looking for more of a specific framework or a specific map for especially the second and third sessions.
Yeah. Okay. And we'll talk about that today. We'll talk about my map of second and third sessions. And I think my sort of last question is, so like if you think of the structure of your first few sessions, like what's the structure, right? Do they come in and you do a intake form and then do an assessment and then have them process, or like what do you do in session one?
Yeah, so they fill out their paperwork with me before they see me. I get the paperwork done, and so I already kind of have an idea before they come in of um, what their presenting problem is and what's important to them, what goals they have. So that's really helpful. So when they come um, in the first session, like I said, it's just sort of, hey, could you expand upon or let me know what's really important for you to me, for me to hear from you today? And after that, I don't get very formal. With my assessments, depending on the presentation, I tend to just kind of really want to get the goals, get on the same page, I guess, with the goals.
Mhm.
But again, it's not. I don't tend to be very formal with that. And then maybe the third session, we begin to slowly dive in deeper about one of those rabbit holes or one of those things that they're looking to improve on.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
not.
You're not what?
I said I don't know. It feels like I want to add to it. It feels incomplete a little bit for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you're talking about what a lot of therapists sort of experience, right? Of yeah, do the paperwork and then talk, and then sometimes clients come in so hot that I don't want to interrupt them and like push them in one direction or not. But then I also kind of do feel like I don't quite know where we're going or what's next or that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So this is my basic framework. You can trust me. You make sense. I hear what you want. These are my first three sessions. Um, yeah. Yeah. So a little bit about my own sort of background here. Um, So when I was in grad school, I almost didn't graduate. I guess technically I would have, but you had to have like 500 hours of client contact, right?
Hmm.
And my clients would not come back, right? Like my dropout rate was just astronomical. It was to the point that I had to like drive to Little Rock from Cersei like on the weekend so I could watch groups. And then I would watch a lot of tape. That's mostly what I did. I watch a lot of tape and get a lot of alternative hours.
Hmm.
And if you know anything, I'll give you a pro tip here. There's only three numbers you need to know if you are a good therapist. If you hit these three numbers, if you hit two out of the three, like you're really good. And one of those numbers is your first session dropout rate. So my first session dropout rate was really low or was really high, right? And then so yeah, basically I was not doing a good job. And then 4 or 5 years later, I came up here to Northwest Arkansas, and my dropout rate wasn't horrible, but I basically like wasn't keeping clients. And my average client would come for about 5 sessions, which in the literature and in the research is actually normal, right? In outpatient mental health sort of clinics, people come for an average of 5 sessions, sort of worldwide in large representative studies. And then in private practice sort of settings, people come for about 8 to 12 sessions. So that's about average. So I thought, this is fine, but like I could tell something was still off. So then what I decided to do, as I do, is to really double down on like what is going on in my first session, especially so I could really fix this problem. Um, and actually, I want to show you why. But before I do that, it looks like you have a question. What's your thought? What's your question?
Nothing specific. I was just kind of making sense of what you're saying in my head. It seems like the shift for you was in the second session. Is that right?
So the shift for me wasn't. I basically so what I did was I shifted around how I do my first session, and then I decided to shift around how to do my session 2 and my session 3.
Okay.
And I think all of that has had a huge impact. We'll talk about that later. But I think this this problem is actually much this problem of keeping clients is a much bigger problem than I think that we realize.
Mm.
So I didn't you sound you look like you had a look or a thought, and I didn't know if you had a question. No.
Oh yeah, I agree.
So here's the thing, man. Paul and I are actually working on this problem now, right? Um, like we're writing up a formal sort of we're writing up a formal method of doing this so we can like really distribute it to more people. And so let's say that you're a brand new client, I mean a brand new therapist, right? Straight out of school. Let's say that you get 2 new clients a week and 3 out of 4 of them come back after the first session, right? And let's say that you're like the worldwide average, right? Of you see people for about 10 sessions. That's right in between that 8 to 12 mark.
Hmm.
What you find out very quickly is that you never build past 16 clients a week.
Mm.
This when Paul showed me this calculator, it blew my freaking brain. It blew my freaking brain. Because what it means is 2 things. It suddenly makes sense to me of all the new therapists that I know who can't get full. I literally had a buddy reach out to me, I guess about a month ago now, working in Fayetteville, working at a group practice. He gets like 1 to 2 clients a week. And he's like, man, I don't know why. Like, I don't know how to build. And he's like, I'm okay for now, but I can't keep doing this. Right. Like, and that's actually a really common problem. Um, and then it also made sense to me for why this problem gets stuck. Because what has to then happen is that the people who are like when I talk to people who have successful practices, they don't get more than 2 clients a week on average, right? As in, they probably get two or three phone calls a week. So they're not really getting that many more consistent clients. They're not really doing that, which means that their actual number of sessions has to be much longer. They're keeping clients for 20 to 30 sessions, which also, and then those clients then go out and those clients like tell people, and over a 2 or 3 year period, these people build up a caseload while working inside of a group practice, and then they can leave, right? And the problem with that is that they don't know how their process works. They have no idea. They just know that it works for them, right?
Mhm.
And they can't help new therapists get clients. Because if you ask them, they say things like, well, you need to network or market, which is not what they did at all. And then it gets worse because what they did is something that you probably can't replicate, right? Working at a group practice for 2.5 years in order to leave after you have, seen 300 clients. Like, that's not really a strategy for like getting clients. It's sort of a weird thing. So I think it's a big problem. And that's the problem that we're trying to crack and, teach people how to crack, basically. Yeah. So here's the big idea, man. The big idea is that everything flows through the Therapeutic Alliance. Have we talked about the Therapeutic Alliance before, me and you?
A little bit, a little bit.
Okay, what have I said about the Therapeutic Alliance? I don't want to repeat myself too much. What do you remember about it?
Maybe it was you, maybe it was other research or trainings I've done, but just the alliance is one of the biggest indicators of people sticking around and being a part of your therapeutic process. If they feel like you are aligned with them, if you're attuned to them, then everything else kind of comes after that. Is kind of what I've
Yeah,
heard from if not you, others too.
yeah, yeah, man. I think that's hangs down true. I think the thing that people miss, this is the thing that people miss, is that everyone talks about the Therapeutic Alliance as though it's just how clients feel about you. So if your clients like you, they think that you're really nice, you have a strong alliance. That's false. That's false. The Therapeutic Alliance is not just about the bond between the client and you. It's also about agreement on what is the goal of therapy and how do we get there. And it's those last two parts that most people really miss, right? Um, and it comes up, and you will see this because you will get clients, and they will have seen a previous therapist, and you'll ask them, "Why did you stop seeing that previous therapist?" And they'll say things like, I felt like we were better friends than like client therapists. Or, yeah, my therapist was really good at talking, but I never really figured out like what to do about my problem. Right. And what they're saying is we had a really great bond. I liked my therapist. But when it came to the goals of therapy, we were not aligned. And when it came to the steps required to meet those goals, we were not aligned. So everything flows through this sort of three prongs of the alliance. Everything. So I think in the first session, clients come in with two big questions. Are you safe? Are you going to judge me? Do you have a plan? Are you competent? And I actually think that this question of competence is more important than the question of I think this is what is at the heart of the Therapeutic Alliance, right? I don't just want to know that you care. I want to know that I can trust you to handle the situation. I think that's really the heart of the alliance. I think about when you go to see a doctor, right? Like you want your doctor to be kind and warm and take time to explain things to you. But you also like if that's it, I don't know if I have had this happen. Talk to like doctors or physicians and they gab and talk and I'm like, yeah, but what about my problem? Like, can you actually help me with this? And if they can't, then I still get freaked out. Like it's not a fun thing for me. So my first session has I think four big parts. First is you tell the client the plan. Right. And so what I do is I say, hey, look, so this is our first session. Um, and my first sessions have four big parts, right? First is what we're doing right now, and we're have to get your address. That's for safety reasons. The second, I want to get some of your story. I really want to figure out like why you're here. The third part, we're going to go over the paperwork. It's always the most awkward part because it's like this hard right turn. So I just want to acknowledge that it's awkward. But in about 30 minutes at 12:30, we'll have to do a hard right turn right into that. And then we'll end talking about next steps. And I think you tell them the plan because it gives them confidence. Like you picked up on before, man, when they come in, they have to come in hot and anxious. And part of what helps them to, I think, reduce their anxiety is to feel like, okay, this therapist knows what they're doing. This is also where you can take care of safety issues. I realize that when I am flipping the session in this way, right, giving their story priority, sometimes there are safety concerns. And so that's when I get their email. That's when I get their address because I do telehealth. If you were worried about someone's safety, this is when you would sort of check in on those things. So that sort of stuff. Okay. Then you get their story. There's a concept in business called TTV, which is an acronym for time to value. And basically what we know is people really want to have an immediate win, right? So the classic example is like in an ideal fitness business, someone would sign up for your training, your CrossFit membership, and they push enter, and then immediately they have a six-pack abs. They're like, this is awesome, right? Like that's like the ideal way of like providing any sort of service. And so we have to really think about how do we give people as soon as possible what they came in for? And I think the way to do this is kind of what you picked up on of like, they're coming in, right? They're probably already anxious about coming in, telling someone else that they have this horrible problem that even if we don't feel like it's horrible, they feel like it's horrible, right? And they want someone to listen to them and like empathize with them and make them feel like they're not crazy. So let's do that immediately. And I think that the big thing is that it's not enough to ask questions, right? I think, as a rule of thumb, 20% of this part of the session, which takes about 20 minutes, I let them go for about 20, 25 minutes, is to ask 20% open-ended questions and to do 80% summary. Because what you do through summarizing is you're demonstrating competence. You're demonstrating I understand you. It's one thing to say I understand. It's something else to summarize what people are experiencing, feeling, thinking, because it really feels like, oh wait, you're actually listening. You really got me. So summarize. Then at the end of this sort of 20-minute, 25-minute period, summarize everything again. People eat it up. So that's the first 30 minutes of the session, right? Then you go over the paperwork. Right? And I make sure to be direct. This is where I've fallen into a lot of traps in the past, especially around things like money and finances and safety issues, as well as for me doing telehealth, internet connection. I used to try to be like nuanced and sort of like, no, people just got to be flat out direct. And I time this out because it always feels like the end of the session to me. But when I timed it out, it takes about 5 to 7 minutes to really do a good job of this. And then if you think about it, if you took if they came in 2 minutes late, you spent 3 minutes talking about what's going to happen, that's 5 minutes total. They spent 20, 25 minutes talking about their story and summarizing it, right? You're up to 25, 30 minutes. And you do this for 7 minutes. You're up to, 35 to 42 minutes, right? So then you got to fill about 10 minutes left. And this is when we talk about the next two sessions. And what I always say, I always do this and say, okay, so let's talk next steps. I think our next session should be a history session. And then I think session 3 of ours should be a goal setting session. Now, the order of that is totally flexible. If they come in and they're like really anxious and really upset, then we'd probably go back to more of like a goal setting session, right? If they come in and they're talking about things and they sort of calm down and they're not, and the problem isn't like immediate, then we'll go into a history session. But I'll let them know that's the plan. Then I check in with them. I say, okay, so I think what we should do is I think next session should be a history session. It's going to help me get a really clear bead on you and how you're presenting problem makes sense given your history, right? And then I think we should do a goal setting session so we can really, really get on the same page about how we're gonna like help you move forward with this problem. So those are the two things. People almost always go, okay, great. I think they like the fact that there's a plan there. And then I give 2 guarantees. I didn't realize I was saying this because I had a big dropout rate. And I was like, I've got to freaking fix this. And then so I started giving people these 2 ideas, and I realized that these work in the same sort of way that a guarantee works, right? So whenever people buy something, there's always this like anxiety about, did I just make a big mistake, right? I'm sure you felt this. You buy a new refrigerator, it costs, I don't know, $1,000. Like, man, did I just get gypped? I don't know. It's gonna work. What happens if it breaks? And the way that you get around that in business is you give people a guarantee, right? And so you say, hey, yeah, if you for any reason don't want this, take it back for 100% guarantee. People are much more likely to buy. We can't say that in therapy, right? You can't be like, well, I can guarantee I'll fix your problem in 12 sessions, and if not, I'll pay you back all the money. Like that's not how this works. But what I started doing was I started telling people these 2 stories. I would say, hey, look, I do therapy by Pixar theory of therapy. Have you seen the movie Toy Story?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what they all say. I don't know. Toy Story was like I think like the last movie everyone saw, apparently, at least of my generation and like up. Like everyone saw this movie. Toy Story is a story of a toy named Woody who's king of the hill, right? Until one day, Buzz Lightyear shows up. And the next thing you know, Woody finds himself in alien lands facing monsters, right? But by the end of the movie, he's back home. And things are different, but they're kind of the same. And each session should be like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Me and you, we're going to face monsters together. We're going to talk about hard things. But at the end of each of our sessions, you should feel like, okay, I'm back home. Things are different, and I'm also back home. People usually go, okay, yeah. I started saying that because I had several people who they'd come in, and I was trained to do a lot of EFT, and so we go into those hard emotions. And I had a lot of people who, not a lot, I had a few people, I would say probably 2 or 3, within maybe a 2-month period, who they would come in, talk about therapy, and then they would come in the next week saying, I came in, I almost didn't want to come in this week. I just got so anxious, right, about coming into therapy. And so what they're telling me is that something about last session was like really overwhelming for them. Or they would say, yeah, after session, I like couldn't go back to work. I was just like just too active. I was too upset. I was too emotional. I couldn't do it anymore. And it's like, okay. For these people, the therapy is way too intense. And so I've got to sort of set the expectation that like therapy, if we need to tone it back some, we can do that. And that's why I started telling that story. And then I also want you to know that the most important thing in therapy is our relationship. Okay. So if I ever do anything that's going to offend you, if you let me know about it, I will always repair with you. You know, that could be for any reason. It could be because I said something that was just tone deaf. Because it could be because you took something the wrong way. It could be because I said something that was actually really offensive. You know, um, and I just want you to know if I ever say anything along those lines, and if you let me know, I will always repair with you. Since I started doing this, I haven't had any clients who have ever like honestly brought this up. Um, and I also haven't had any clients who've gotten. I had one client who got overwhelmed in our session, and we were able to talk about it, and it it, it wasn't a problem. So, and then I go back to the timeline. I say, okay, so our next session is our history session. What I want you to do is really simple. I want you to get a sheet of paper, draw a line down the middle, and do 5 and 5. 5 of your best events and 5 of your worst events, right? Throughout your life. And bring that in, and we'll process that next session. I think that's also important because I think sometimes people want something to do after session. And I think people also want to feel like, because people want to have the sense that they're making progress, right? I came in and we're not going to do anything for another week. Ah! Like, I think they want to have something that they feel like is tangible. So that's what I do in the first session. What are your questions, Mr. Luke?
I'm just kind of processing. With the timeline, just to clarify too, you said 5 best and worst for both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's good. I love the repair piece. I think is so key for me. Just laying out that on the
Yeah,
get-go. They may not have that model for them in any other relationships. So
absolutely. Absolutely. Any other questions?
this is all the first session, huh?
This is first session, man.
It's very that's I feel like you're packing in a lot more than some other people do, and yet it also seems like less at the same time. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? Ready for session 2 or?
Some people, I know everyone uses different assessments and all that. Do you have any tips on like what they're just doing their story in this first session? Like it seems like you're pretty hands off with that 20-25 minutes of when they're kind of just sharing. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you don't really use any assessment tools at all, the first one.
Let's talk about session 2.
Okay.
So here's the thing, okay? I don't know anybody else. Do you know people who actually use formal assessments?
In agency settings that I've been in, you have to use a few of them that are just triggered because of ages or because of
Yeah.
symptoms. But I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of people don't really like them a whole lot.
Yeah. So for about 3 years, like up until about June when I left the Joshua Center, I used assessments regularly. I used the ACE, right, which is the Adverse Childhood Experiences Questionnaire. I also used the SRS and ORS, right? That's a combo. You give the S, you give the ORS at the beginning of the session, and it's called the Outcome Rating Scale, and it just clients self-rate how they're doing as they're coming into session. And then at the end of the session, you give the SRS, which is the Session Rating Scale, so clients rate how well the session went. And bought a program through Fit Outcomes that allow me to track my data over time, right? And then I switched to the OQ45, Outcome Questionnaire 45. It's a more sophisticated version. I actually really like it. And I'm actually talking to them now about if I'm going to renew for this next coming year, and I'm probably not going to renew. The problem with assessments that I have is they don't really tell you that much data.
Mm.
Like if someone is really doing poorly, then it can tell you that they've improved. Most of the time, the clients that I work with, they're basically the worried well. And so the assessments really don't give you a clear picture consistently of how they're doing. So I don't see a real clear reason to have one. I have one client once who really liked it when I gave her the stuff because she could see her progress. Most of the time, clients don't care about that. That's my experience. The other thing is these assessments are very sensitive to other. I just don't feel like I got enough benefit out of them to keep using them.
Yeah.
So that's my experience, right? With 3 different assessments for 3 years. So the reason that I do the history timeline is not to get their history. Here's a little secret. The history actually doesn't matter. It sounds like a horrible thing to like say, but I'll tell you a silly story. So my wife and I are big Star Trek fans, and we watched through one of the old Star Treks that I had to watch through when I was a kid. And I remember we were coming up the very last season, and this episode popped up, and I was like, Laura, that's my wife's name. I'm so excited. This is my favorite episode. X and Y and Z happens in this episode. And we watched the episode, and X nor Y nor Z happened. And I was like, how the flip did I not remember? How did I forget? Like, what happened? I totally forgot what happened. It happened totally different than how I remembered it, man. It was like bizarre. And I think what we know from the memory research is that people's memory of the event is actually not accurate. So if our intention is to assess in order to get an accurate sense of what's happened, the way to do that is not through asking clients for self-reports. What is really helpful though I don't see a reason for that. But for me, the assessment is only about one thing: demonstrating that I understand you. It's the first part of the therapeutic bond of the therapeutic alliance, right? It's all about the bond. So I, in some sense, don't believe that's not true. I don't know if any of this stuff actually happened the way that you said that it happened. It probably didn't. But I want you to know that I'm listening and that I hear you, and I definitely hear how it is impacting you today. And so that's what people think assessment is about, figuring out what actually happened. And I think assessment is actually about giving us a way to really deeply let the client know that I understand your story, that you make sense to me. So that's why I do what I do. Any questions on that?
Yeah, that's helpful. Again, it all comes back to the alliance, right? It all comes
All
back
comes
to.
back to the alliance. Everything goes through the alliance.
Mhm.
I think people still have this question, right? Like they come after the first session, and if they come back, I think worldwide, the most common number of sessions people come in for is one. I mean, dropout is like a huge problem. So if people come back, it's a huge gift. They trust you. It's a huge sign that they trust you enough. But that is no guarantee that they feel like these questions are answered.
Mhm.
So folks to double down on these questions again, right? Are you safe? Are you going to judge me? Do you have a plan? Are you competent? And so by giving them this sort of structure, but then also like using this whole session to assess, the only function of that is really to show that I understand you. Like I think it really helps to meet that goal, to answer these two questions. So what I do is I check in, see if they have anything pressing. Hey, look, I have a plan for today. My plan is to go over our timeline, but I want to be hyper collaborative. And so if something happened, I had a client a few weeks ago who their mom died, so we need to talk about that. If something like that has happened for you that we have to talk about, I'm happy to go over that. You let me know. And then what I do, and I think this is key, because whenever I do my termination interview, the one thing that people always say was really helpful, that's not true. The one thing people consistently say is really helpful is this timeline session, because they've never put their entire life together in a way, like to make it all make sense. And so at the end of that, I basically have this pattern of X happened to you, and then Y happened to you, and then X happened to you. And that makes sense of why you're here today struggling with Y. Right. So they're like, my mom left. I'm coming in because I'm really anxious, and my mom left when I was a kid, and then we moved to the States, and I never feel like I fit in. Then I'd say, wow, this makes a lot of sense to me, right? Like your mom left. She was your mom, right? And she gave birth to you. And somehow she didn't feel like it was worth it to stick around. And you guys come all the way to the States, this random place. You don't speak the language, and dad's working a lot because he's got to take care of everybody. But like, that means that you're sort of home alone a lot, So then, of course, you feel like you never fit in. So you have this sort of ambient anxiety of like, I've got to be on hyper alert all the time, right? Because who's taking care of me? So of course you feel anxious. And that's the problem that you're here to like solve. So you take all their history, you tie it all into what they told you in session 1. Because you're trying to demonstrate, not say, but demonstrate, you make sense to me. When I look at all the things in your life, it makes sense to me that you ended up where you are today, and then this is your problem. So it's like back in middle school when they say show, don't tell. If I don't know if you were like me, but in every middle school English class I had, they always said show, don't tell, show, don't tell, show, don't tell. Which is also the same thing my dad told me. My dad was big into math and tried to teach me how to do math. And he was always like, show your work, show your work. Don't just skip to the answer, show your work. The same principle. Mm-hmm. You don't say, I understand. You show them you understand by summarizing and validating throughout the way. And at the end, you give one big summary that ties it all together. And then you say, this is how your present problem makes sense. So that's session 2. What are your questions, Mr. Luke?
Yeah, it seems like you take what they kind of just give in the first session, you get the timeline in the second, and I like how you kind of reach back and really validate and help them make sense of not only the timeline, like it's not this like different thing that you're doing. It's like this is directly related to why you're here and what your concerns are. And like you're not this monster, or you're not crazy, like you're a human and you make sense.
You got it, man. Yeah. You're doing a beautiful job right now of demonstrating understanding. Instead of just saying, I get it. So you already got the skills for it, Well done. Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions or thoughts before we move on to session 3?
In the first one that you give them like the homework of the timeline, do you give them anything in between session 2 and session 3?
I don't. If they are really, really nervous about getting started, that's when I will move. I'll do the goal setting session first. So if my sense is that they'll get really anxious about not having something to do, I'll do goal setting first, and we'll get into why I do it that way. But I don't typically do that. The problem with the problem with clients and homework is clients will say that they want homework and then they won't do it. You know, and so it's sort of a weird thing, man. So I give homework not to give homework, but to give clients the sense that they have something to do between sessions. It's almost like I don't know. My son, my 4-year-old, there was a period where he was calling in the middle of the night, and it would get us up. And one of the things he would say was, "I'm really lonely." That's like the saddest thing when a little kid is like, "I'm really lonely. I'm really lonely, Dad." And so what we did was we started giving him a stuffed animal. That this little, it's like literally a teddy bear. He keeps in his room on his bed to keep him company, right? It's kind of like that. That's really the purpose of giving clients homework.
Kind of grounding, kind of.
Grounding for them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah, clients don't always. Some clients, anyway. We'll get into clients and homework in this next session. But any other questions?
Okay, so it sounds like you typically like to do the order that you're presenting, but you don't, unless someone like needs it, then you would move the goal setting to the second.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So look, we're still trying to answer these same questions, right? Are you safe? Will you judge me? Do you plan? Are you competent? I start the session the same way. I always check in. Hey, I want to check in. Like, how have things been going? I don't ask that. I don't ask that. I don't ask how have things been going. I ask, is there anything that's happened between this session and last session that we really need to talk about? Today we're going to go over goals, but if something really big happened, I'm happy to sort of like, talk about that. Most of the time they say no. So we go into goals setting, and this is basically my version of doing a treatment plan. It's super simple. Get a sheet of paper. I write at the top goal, and I write objective 1, 2, 3. And I just ask, so what's your big goal for coming into therapy? Usually the goal is not well articulated. And then I ask, what do you feel like are the steps to meeting this goal? And usually they say a bunch of things that like are actually other goals, So they'll say something like, I just want to feel less anxious. Okay, great. Yeah, sure. And how do you want to get there? Well, I don't know. I need to like figure out like, how to be more positive. Okay, perfect. So here's the thing, right? The same way that the assessment, it's not about the assessment. It's not about what actually happened. The treatment plan is not. The treatment plan is actually the assessment. The treatment plan is actually the assessment. It's not about the things on the plan. It's not about that. It's about me assessing what are your expectations for the therapy. Clients come in as one of 3 types. Some people are concrete, right? They want a concrete thing to do. So if they come in and I say, hey, what's your big goal? Well, I'm just feeling really anxious. Okay, what do you feel like are the steps to that? Like what do you feel like is the first step in like you not feeling anxious anymore? They'll say something like, you know what? Whenever I work out, I don't feel anxious. I need to work out again. And I go, great, you're brilliant. That's a great idea. Put that down as the first thing on your as your like steps, as your objective, right? Work out. How often do you need to work out? Like, what's your sort of rhythm? Man, I need to work out three times a week. If I can do that, that's great. Perfect. That's your first thing, right? And then I will prescribe that to them as homework. And I do this because I have this theory of how people change, right? EFT, emotions, yada yada yada. But clients have a different theory. And if my goal and tasks are different than the client's goals and tasks, you run into an alliance rupture. So you've got to give them what they want. I made that mistake so often. There's probably 100 clients out there who are seeing other therapists and they're saying things like, yeah, my therapist was really kind, but like he never really gave me any like skills. Well, guess what? So I use their response as a way to assess. Some people are comfortites, right? That's what I call them, my sort of typology. And they will say, and I'll ask them, what do you feel like you need to get over this anxiety? I just really need to like process through like all the stuff that's been happening. And I go, okay, if I give you homework, you're never going to do it. You just want someone to come. You want a place where you can come and talk and be validated. Perfect. I now know that, right? Like, so they come in and I normalize and I summarize and I reflect and I validate and do it again. Some clients come in and they go, I have no idea. And this is where everybody loses their mind. Because when the clients come in and they say, I have no idea, you're like, well, crap, I got to figure it out. And what I've learned is those are actually the easy clients. Because you go, great. That means we only have one thing to do. We got to help you get clarity. And so then we'll get clarity and we'll talk about, what's been going on, yada, yada, yada. And I'll ask them later on, what do you feel like you need to do here? And what do you feel like you need? And all that sort of stuff. And eventually they'll push themselves into either comfortite or concrete. So, of course, you're validating along the way, but you're also demonstrating competence, right? If the Therapeutic Alliance is the bond, the goals, and the tasks, and if you're off in any of those, you have an alliance rupture. This is my way of dealing with the goals and the tasks of therapy. And so that's why I do it this way. And I'll show you what I've seen over time is my outcomes have dramatically changed, right? So when I moved up here, for the first, I don't know, year and a half, I had people stay for about 5 sessions. And then I ran my numbers back in, I think it was like February, maybe April. And my average client comes in for about 20 sessions, right? But there's a big sort of skew there, right? I have some clients who come in for a lot of sessions, and I have some clients coming in for 60, 50 sessions, 45 sessions, 40 sessions, 35 sessions, 30 sessions, right? My most common number of sessions is 8, right? And I had a few flukes. I call them flukes, maybe they're not flukes, of people who came in for like a very few number of times. Like I had 2 people who came in for like 3 sessions. 2 people came in for 3. So if I remove them, my average client session then is 21 sessions. And my most middle number is 17, and the average client that comes in, or the most common number is 8. So that's sort of the distribution. So I went from 5 sessions per client to 20 sessions per client. That's the outcome data that I've seen. So
Sounds great. Unsure what's
yeah. Okay, cool. Well, look, we'll stop the recording there. That's it, man.